Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're live in downtown Brooklyn, USA. Same studio, different backdrop. Hannah Gais, crew in studio with us. Welcome to this new show. This is the public version of it. I want to thank the already 453 people that are on Patreon getting all the premium content, making this show possible. Super producer Matt Leck is with us. David Slavic is with us. Chris Lepaco with the... Oh, we're going to listen to this?
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris Lepaco. We'll play that out sometime. My voice is like Milli Vanilli. That's the most interesting compliment or insult I've gotten in my life. Brian Spinks is with us. He helped put that sketch together of all of the voices. And that actually created some sense of empathy in me for people in my life who have to deal with me, because listening to those all at once, I was like, wow, that could be a lot. So again, thank you. The first 453 people who've become members on Patreon. You're going to get the post-game show, which we're going to keep rolling with live, not on YouTube. We're going to leave the stream behind when the public show is over. We're going to take calls, do IMs, and do stories that you're pitching to us right now in the Discord channel. And David Slavic, the other great producer, is curating right now as we speak, because I'm going to go over shows that topics that members ask for, and the post-game show will come out tomorrow. The public show will go out on YouTube, iTunes tomorrow. And, of course, we'll live on YouTube. And then on Sunday, the history, the primer of the third way, how it still pollutes global center-left politics today. That's coming out on Sunday. Thank you, everyone who has joined. And I have to do... Did you want to add something, Matthew?
I want to do a quick note on iTunes. We're currently in the iTunes validation process. Hopefully that will be done by tomorrow or the next day. If not, probably definitely by Friday. But if we're not there in iTunes, you will be able to get the feed into your podcast player by checking the Twitter feed.
Yes, and when we are up and going on iTunes, it's the same thing. Even if you're a Patreon member, I humbly request that you go into iTunes and help us game that system, write reviews of the show, download all of the episodes, because we want the public version of the show to go far and wide, and we want, obviously, everybody that has been amazing and kind enough to support us on Patreon to get that excellent premium content that we are working steadily away on. And I do need to thank some people out of the gate. Robert, Zane, Alex, and Derek are four people that specifically contributed in ways that allowed everything to get off the ground. I want to thank those four people immensely, not only for their resources, but each of them actually has given me their time. Then there's this core group of people: Mark, Ben, Artesia, Richard, Steven, David, Sean. It wouldn't be happening without these people, period. It's as simple as that. Chris Lepaco with the song, Brian Spinks, Sam. Wouldn't be happening without Sam, as much as I hate to admit it. Why didn't the Sam impression make it into that mashup? Brian's not on mic, but I think I'll do it. I'm used to having my friends go by me in my career, and now Michael, God damn it. All right, strong out of the gate. Got to start with just a couple of brief points of commentary, and then Hannah's going to come on mic, and we're going to talk about tweed coat racism and why Russia makes everybody dumb, and Hannah's going to introduce herself a bit. Then we're going to meet a couple more members of our crew. But we got to note two things. As we are recording this, and I think we have this sound ready, there has been another level of escalation in the North Korea rhetorical conflict. Let's put it that way. Thankfully, it's not. It might be by the time you're listening to this an actual conflict, but it is certainly a rhetorical escalation. Let's make a couple of points clear. We would not be here today without George W. Bush jettisoning and undermining the agreed framework negotiated by the Clinton administration and undermining Kim Dae-jung's Sunshine Policy, which was not perfect, obviously did not solve some of the sort of structural and longstanding problems in North Korea, but absolutely had contained the program and had come to some sense of arrangement with North Korea. Remember, especially with the new restoration of George Bush in the public mind, just because he wasn't as grotesquely, overtly bigoted as Donald Trump. Remember who he was and that he set the stage for the global mess we're in today. Barack Obama worked to rein things back in, but there was not a new durable agreement. And obviously Donald Trump is beyond unequipped to deal with any sort of thing like this. He can't deal with a bilateral trade negotiation with Malta, let alone what's happening with North Korea. And please remember that, because this is right around the time in the George W. Bush presidency when the September 11th attacks happened, and all of a sudden he became the president, quote unquote. And he was given a blank check to wage a global war and reign and attack civil liberties, the consequences of which we are still living out. So it is incumbent upon us to never give into a narrative like that with Donald Trump. It's fundamentally dangerous, and it's also because he has obviously, and we're going to hear in this clip right now, recklessly escalated this conflict. This is today is Tuesday, August 8th. This is Donald Trump threatening North Korea.
Kim Jong-un appears to have ramped up his capability to deliver his deadliest weapons, and tonight is drawing a stern warning from President Trump about threatening the U.S.
They will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
So there you have it. And it's obviously a child, an unequipped child playing games, two unequipped children playing games, two inherited power trust fund babies, one who is a dictator and one who has delusions of grandeur of being a dictator, jeopardizing global well-being. Hopefully there'll be an intervention, and we will talk about this more on the show in terms of the inner dynamics of North Korea as well. A second thing to touch on briefly, if the world survives, and if there is a 2020 election, can we as people on the center left, to the actual left, to anybody that will be voting in a Democratic primary, can we de-dumbify? Is that something that we can all come together and do? Over the past week or so, there has been a sort of new flare-up in this battle between the progressive left and I guess I won't hide my bias, the pseudo-woke neoliberal center, positioning left politics versus quote-unquote identity politics. Now, I've said many times, obviously, a robust inequality and left agenda is essential to dealing with racial and gender disparities. That's the policy case, and we need to make that. But I also think that the rejection that some people on our side have had right out of the gate of the Kamala Harris, and I want to say as distinct from a critique of her record, David Dane has pointed out that her record on the foreclosure crisis and prosecuting criminal banks is terrible. And you know who else's public record is horrible on this? Basically every single modern politician of Republican and Democratic parties that have dealt with this issue. It's not exculpatory of her, but there's nothing special about her mess-ups in this. So I'm excited for Bernie Sanders to run for president again, and I would like Elizabeth Warren too as well. But I also want to open up a big open opportunity, embrace, if you will, of Kamala Harris if she is willing to move to the serious left on inequality, on financial reform, on Medicare for all, if she pivots and defends the Iran deal and Barack Obama's legacy on that, and she evolves a new position on the Middle East, I think these things are actually all achievable. And I think it would behoove us on the left to recognize why she's appealing to people and also come from a position of strength and positioning for the long term and not fear and resentment and reactivity. Let's give her a roadmap that she can win with. And she can choose it or not. And we'll choose her or not. But there is a obvious door here for any smart Democratic politician to try to synthesize and embrace that has a serious, robust, radical economic agenda that deals with policing, race, prison issues, and also a new coherent foreign policy. Let's give her the roadmap, have the debate on the merits, and be ready to build on our power base and force people into our coalition and not reject them out of hands if they could potentially be persuaded, which she can be because she's an opportunistic politician. And I mean that as a compliment. Hannah Gais is an opportunistic writer. And I mean that as a compliment. She's also a member of the Michael Brooks Show crew. She'll have a response to me in 30 seconds. Her face seems a little bit iffy on that intro. But I am very, very excited to have her on. We're talking about her writing on pseudoscientific racism. You're going to see a resurgence of this, and it's also going to lead later to our first pyramid segment of the new show, and also why Russia makes everyone dumb. So listen to your first break music on the Michael Brooks Show. You know it had to be Chronics, and we will be right back with Hannah Gais.
The pressures of your life and it tough. No stay down, mama, time pick it up. No bother with the down, full style, strictly up, full vibes. I pick it up when the bills, them, the rent and the mortgage due. Yeah. When me chalice, when your best friends are gone and it's only you. Yeah, like a pass, split turn up the music. Skanking sweet, everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and the rock with me. You know feel a reggae music sweet, yeah. Skanking sweet, everybody wanna feel like free.
Welcome back, the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is Hannah Gais, and not only is she a guest, she is one of 6 people that you're going to be hearing from regularly. Hannah, very excited to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being on the crew.
Yeah.
You're not just on. I mean, there's some people that will be on and then they will never be on again.
On frequently.
On frequently. La Familia. Could you just give like a brief snapshot of who you are, what you write about, what you study? And I just want to say the reason, I mean, Hannah's a brilliant writer, but the reason I know you is because you did an amazing Louise Mensch impression on Corey Pine's podcast, and Corey is also crew.
Well, I am a freelance writer. I write for The Baffler and a number of other publications. I'm soon attending Harvard Divinity School to focus on nationalism and religion in post-Soviet Russia. And I've been writing frequently about the alt-right.
So that's where I want to start. You have a recent piece in The Baffler about this sort of, you call it white nationalism's new clothes. And, you know, one of the things that strikes me about it is, and you make this point in the article, is that this stuff, this brand proposition of making racism something that is genteel or scientific or rooted in the numbers, first of all, there's nothing new about it. And secondly, is it plays on, and I think we see this, and I know this will piss a lot of people off, but one of the reasons that I get annoyed by like the Sam Harris crowd at times, and I'm not equating them with Richard Spencer, but the reason I get annoyed by it is that there is this pseudo sort of certainty and religious faith in numbers or science, mostly from people who are not equipped to read numbers or science, and basically are just using pseudoscience to reinforce age-old bigotry, right? So I'd like you to talk about like what they're doing with this branding and how it fits into this kind of like larger number obsession culture.
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things that has changed a lot to tapping into that is that age-old groups like the KKK have declining numbers, and partly just because, well, it's easy to be anonymous in that regard. This makes it seem much more professional.
Right.
You have a lot of people like Charles Murray who have been doing this for years, and a lot of these guys are drawing influence from them. I mean, probably the biggest example is like Radix Journal, which is Richard Spencer's journal that comes out of MPI.
It's his National Policy Institute.
Of course,
so
innocuous sounding.
Right.
It could be about literally anything from like tax policy to, I mean...
When I first saw Matt subscribe to the National Policy Institute, I didn't think anything of it, as an example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
well,
is there something wrong with the documents that are coming out of the NPI?
You're just trying to have a free exchange of ideas, huh? Yeah.
Got to hear both sides.
Exactly, right.
But I mean, I think one of the big things about it is that people are fascinated by this. And one of the things that these guys have figured out is they'll get more attention by seeming new and flashy, and kind of like sexy in like a sort of academic way.
Right. So you know, and then the other kind of component of this, and I think that in some ways Angela Nagel, I loved her book. I think in some ways she went a little too far, with some of the kind of specifics of the argumentation, but I'll save that for my conversation with her. But the other kind of parallel track was this idea that, okay, so you have the resurgence and the rebranding and the use of pseudoscience to recenter racist ideas in the debate. And I don't think they were ever really that far out of the debate. I mean, the bell curve was, published in the New Republic, and, Charles Murray's had this completely unwarranted reputation for quite some time. And then you had the people that somehow found a way, partially because there is some college campus culture, which is, ridiculous and uptight, whatever, that they somehow managed to, say like, hey, my sort of like weird gay anti-Muslim minstrel show is like bold and provocative comedy, when in reality, like, it's incredibly fucking boring. And that's like the Milo track. So you had like the pseudo-intellectualism and then and this also happened in the 80s. This was like P.J. O'Rourke, like, what are actually the funny ones?
Yeah.
And so, like, where do you think that like, do you think that comes from? I guess what I'm saying is that the backlash to some of the kind of obnoxiousness of present quote unquote liberal politics, or is it actually just like the same old hustle that we've seen many times before, which is that the right always wants secretly to be the cool ones? They're the ones always trying to appropriate the best comedians and the best cultural artifacts, when really they're just agents of reactionary bullshit.
I think it's kind of a mixture of both.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's a little difficult is we place a lot of emphasis on campus politics and
Right.
a lot of emphasis on sort of Tumblr liberalism. How important that really is to like what, I mean, Nagel describes this, what would really be the alt-right versus the alt-light. Milo being the alt-light.
Explain that difference to people. That's interesting.
So basically the alt-right is more white supremacist, more white nationalist. They're much more focused on the building of a white ethno-state. They tend to be significantly more academic focused. So organizations like American Renaissance, National Policy Institute, all of these would fit under the alt-right mantle.
Right.
Alt-light tends to be Milo, Mike Cernovich.
Mike Cernovich. I'll teach you how to date girls with a gorilla mindset and also child molestation rings in the Clintons. People like that.
Yeah.
Really stable.
Pizzagate.
People who are really mentally stable, who've built followings for themselves on Twitter through like a weird fusion of like misogyny, conspiracy theories, and kind of like knockoff Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
The thing is, like, those guys are responding to a certain backlash against liberalism that you'd see on Tumblr, college campuses, etc.
Right.
But they're not all that important. I think it's easy to assume that Mike Cernovich has some kind of influence because he went to the White House a few times, and also has a lot of Twitter followers.
Right.
But in reality, what pull does he have with the Trump administration even?
Well, I guess anybody that like got their way into like Trump's wheelhouse could have pull from him because he's like an idiot who follows trinkets. But I guess, I think that like this is really interesting because I mean I'm not obviously Milo and Cernovich and all of that is a big. I think it matters to the extent that there are people with megaphones who are a toxic, disgusting influence on our culture. But what's interesting is that the hard alt-right, I think, is dangerous in a different way, and beyond just the obvious that they're, overtly, and also I like that you also pointed out too that like behind all the tweet and all the bullshit is a classic call for genocide. I mean that is the reality, right? We're talking about the political vision of mass relocations and mass killing of people that don't fit, whatever parameters they're working with in terms of how they're defining modern European identity. But it's also that they're forcing, and you're seeing this now in some of the because there's an alt-right like kind of conflict with these guys and people like Cernovich who also like, look, I don't take credentialism seriously. I don't think Richard Spencer's a bright guy, and I don't think and I don't think any of these people have managed to make it like sexy or interesting. It's the same old garbage. But Mike Cernovich is an idiot. So when he comes out and goes, "I'm not racist, I'm a nationalist," and Spencer goes, "Well, what do you mean? Why don't you follow the logic of what you're saying?" Actually, this kind of, because they're playing in a nationalist, bigoted paradigm, then the logic is that ultimately genocidal position. And that's the way the real actual alt-right, another way that they're different from so many of these political controversies, is that even though it's far out and not close by, they have like an actual power-driven political project. They're not just trying to like signify and position. They want to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing.
And they have international connections too, which
Right.
is important to remember.
You talk about that more, yeah.
Well, so one of the big publication houses that's tied to the alt-right is called Arcos Media, and they've been putting out a lot of work from Alexander Dugin, who's a Russian nationalist philosopher tied to a movement called Eurasianism. I also
Talk a little bit more about that, Dugin and Eurasianism.
Yeah, sure.
Matt again. I'm just terrified at what Matt reads now. Everything. Yeah.
I mean,
Sorry, it's not
I
true.
understand,
It's not
Matt.
true.
It's okay.
Well, you are Russian. I mean, you people have cold souls. No, but tell us about Dugin and Eurasianism. Yeah.
So Dugin is what's been interesting to me because Dugin is actually one of the subjects I really want to study more.
Right.
He's become this kind of boogeyman in the past year or so, where a lot of people have recently discovered who he is. He is a far-right fascist Russian philosopher who's basically tied to this movement called Eurasianism that started in the 19th century and has kind of undergone various changes ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. He's one of the most prominent thinkers tied to this movement, and he's also one of the ones who has some of the most connections to the West. He was recently on the Alex Jones show, for instance. Interestingly, also in a show that also featured Mike Cernovich.
Oh, yeah. I actually are Dugin and Cernovich collaborating?
No.
I will teach you gorilla bear mindset for dating girls from Eurasia perspective.
He has a very big beard too, so
Yeah,
maybe
no,
that's part of it.
He's a real man. But so, as I understand this Eurasianist philosophy is this notion that there are landlocked nations and then there's seafaring nations, and landlocked nations like Russia, I guess in this paradigm, even though it's I don't exactly understand how that works entirely, has, I mean, I'm not a Russia specialist, but okay, that they are places of sort of like fixed cultural identity and values, and there's actually the ambiguity, just like with the hard and soft alt-right too, because and you would know more than me, but I've read him kind of say it's a cultural identity that doesn't necessarily mean race, and then other times I've heard it's a race thing. And then these seafaring countries and places like the United States and the UK that want to basically globalize cosmopolitan values. And that's the sort of geostrategic conflict of our time.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things to understand too with kind of Dugin and Russian identity here is that it's basically being posited as something other than Europe.
Right.
But it's also tied to Europe. One of the things they can never quite, and this plays out in a lot of different ways, is Russia European or not? And this ties pretty heavily into Eurasianism, which kind of sees Russia as being like its own entity, has its own historical destiny. Why this has gotten picked up by people like Mike Cernovich, who is one of the people who also recently discovered Dugin.
Mike, sorry. Read Alexander Dugin.
He's my favorite.
He's my favorite. Yeah, get it on it, please.
He's been tweeting a couple of excerpts.
Chicks don't like seafaring guys. They like landlocked guys. They're real men. I'm Mike Cernovich.
Putin is a real man.
Putin is a real man.
He takes off his shirt in Siberia.
Exactly.
I don't know where Siberia is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right, exactly. So okay, so what do you think, and this will lead to the follow-up question, which is why does Russia make everybody in the United States across the political spectrum who touches it stupid?
Oh, God. The short answer, I think, is especially in the age of the internet,
right?
Everyone wants to be an expert on everything,
right?
Such as the age-old, I just read the Wikipedia for Russia, and I now know everything about Russia.
I mean, but it's just weird because you have like, okay, so my brief thumbnail with no specialty is on Russia is like, okay, I think Russia's a right-wing petrostate. It's run in a pretty oligarchic and I would say authoritarian fashion, but I don't think that, I don't think it's authoritarian in the sense that Putin runs every single thing that happens there. My sense is that power is a little bit more negotiated. And I don't want us to have a global conflict with Russia. I think actually Obama handled Russia pretty well from that sort of bilateral relations perspective. And I think clearly there was some relationship probably having to do with conduits through organized crime and the Trump campaign. And Trump at large, right? That's my kind of read. But then you got like the tanky people that think that Russia's like this aggrieved proponent of international law. And then you have, the alt center who it's like Russia's really triggered them.
They're very worried about the coming communist resurgence.
Yeah, like where does that come from? It's a right-wing country.
I think part of it is now that we are in a sort of new Cold War era, people are bringing back some of the same rhetoric, but they haven't really adapted it much. So you see Joyanne Reed, say, tweeting about, what was it, Soviet Yugoslavia?
Soviet Yugoslavia, yes.
Or there was someone from the New York Times tweeting about a Cyrillic autocracy. Which I would really like to know how that works.
Sounds cool.
Sounds like a band name.
It does sound like a band name. That's such a good call.
It would be a great band name.
Or like a follow-up to the Guns N' Roses Chinese Democracy.
That's great. So what? I mean, so then though, to be fair to, I mean, not to the stupidity and the hysteria, but like, I find this is another thing that's hard to balance because at the same time, it's like, yeah, I think Russia is a right-wing petrostate. You do have a guy like Dugin, I think, has influence in a way that, again, people misread Russia. My read is that, yeah, there's crazy people in Washington who write really dangerous and destructive books, and sometimes they get to orchestrate, I don't know, an invasion of Iraq, as an example. A lot of other times they just write stupid books and idiot politicians blurb them and appear with them because politicians want to appear to have more intellectual sophistication than they do. So is someone like Dugin is he actually setting the template of Russian foreign policy, or is he just an example, which is disturbing enough in and of itself, of the kind of right-wing crackpottery that is around official, Russian sort of think tanks and foreign policy?
He's mostly the latter. You kind of see elements of his thinking playing out in the crisis in Ukraine, particularly in terms of some of the rhetoric about uniting the Kievian Rus, bringing that back. But for the most part, I mean, he's on the fringes. A lot of these guys are on the fringes, and we hear about them and assume that they have a certain amount of clout, but we don't really know. I mean, Dugin is beloved in certain elements of the security state. The extent to that is unclear, in my opinion. But it's hard to. It's hard to say. I would say it's a little different than some of the right wing crackpots who are, say, appealing to people in D.C. But maybe Breitbart would be a good example. Right.
No. Obviously, he's more out there than your standard. But that's kind of like the sign of the time. Like it's like under George W. Bush, the difference was like, and a lot of people made this point, like the kind of racism and colonialism of the soft. I mean, it's weird to say soft neocon, but the kind of like, oh, we'll go and bomb the fuck out of them, and then they'll have a McDonald's and they'll like Israel, versus now where it's like, we'll bomb them, period. And the only ones that will be left will be like awesome royals, like the Saudis. Those guys are great. They do a great job, right? Without even the kind of pretense. So I think you're right in terms of comparing him to somebody that maybe was floating around 2004, 2005, 2006, or 2003. But, we are in the Alex Jones Cernovich era.
Yeah, and it's scary. I mean, the fact that he is, say, coming on the Alex Jones show, the fact that Mike Cernovich is in the same segment is bizarre.
I can just want to note this and promise to the audience, and this might be something that we do because some of the sketches will just be for Patreon members. The Alexander Dugin, Mike Cernovich, Eurasia, Landlocked versus Seafaring Nations Dating Guide for Men, that book is going to be written. And it's going to be written on the Michael Brooks Show. And read live.
In segments.
In segments, yes. And I've already teased it with the chicks like Landlocked guys. So Hannah, before I let you go, and first of all, again, I really want to thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for being part of this undertaking. You and I have just become friends recently, but honestly, I heard you on Corey's show, and I thought you were hilarious, and then looked your stuff up, and it's great. So I really, really am excited to regularly have your perspective. But you're going off to Harvard. Will you talk a little bit about what you're doing there and how it's going to influence our future conversations? Maybe even if you're just planning on doing Cernovich impressions in Harvard Yard.
Yeah, actually, that is, I'm going to Harvard to better improve my Cernovich impressions.
You might find
specifically
some
the divinity school. It needs more
Cernovich
God.
studies.
Cernovich studies. Tweet at him. Yeah. Come at me.
Do it regularly. No, I'll be focusing mostly on Eurasianism and nationalist movements in post-Soviet Russia to then hopefully go on to a PhD, and we'll be paying attention to what's happening now. I mean, I didn't expect this would even be relevant a year ago.
Well,
then all of a sudden it is.
You had some precognition on it. You nailed it.
No, I think I just stumbled into it stupidly. But
you had precognition because you meditate. You're in tune with the forces of the universe, like Alexander Dugin, which chicks like because they have a natural ability to do it themselves.
I'm in tune with the Russian soul.
In tune with the Russian soul. Well, Hannah, I look forward to having many check-ins with the Russian soul with you on the Michael Brooks Show. And again, thanks a million for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, and I realize, I'm sorry, I didn't give you break music for this, but we'll take, if you have anything handy, we'll take a few seconds. Yeah, you can play more Chronics. We're going to take a few calls and a few IMs, 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. The IMs are open. Then we're going to throw somebody in the pyramid. We have music ready for.
Wait, are we going to the bonus section now?
No, we're gonna do a few, like one or two public calls, and then we're gonna get on the phone really briefly. Hopefully, this will work, and maybe it will be cut out when we release the show. But Noah, Waz, Corey, and Gene, we'll get on a couple minutes with them each. But first, we'll go into the phones and take one or two phone calls from you. But we'll be back in about 40 seconds or so. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Hannah.
The pressures of a life and it tough. No stay down, mama, time pick it up. No bother with the down, full style, strictly up, full vibes. I pick it up when the bills, them, the rent and the mortgage due. Yeah. When me chalice, when your best friends are gone and it's only you. Yeah. Like a pass, turn up the music. Skanking sweet. Everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and the feel a reggae music sweet, yeah. Skanking sweet. Everybody wanna feel like free. Forget your troubles and the rock with me.
All right, welcome back, Michael Brooks Show. Take a couple of brief calls, read a few items, and then we're gonna do a little bit Reservoir Dogs style here, where we introduce some of the other members. Alona and Bashkar will be on each in a couple of weeks. You're calling from a 509 area code. Is this who I think it is?
Dude, bruh. Donnie J.
Donnie J. This is a perfect inaugural call for the show.
Looks like the fake news report with Sam Loser had a little baby.
The fake news report with Sam Loser had a little baby? Yes. Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are reproducing. Hey, dude.
Yeah.
First you try to wreck my life by saying I collusioned or whatever, and now you're going after my bros at Fox News. E-Dog is not having it. Here's the deal.
Wait, just to be clear, E-Dog is Eric Bolling. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, dude. Everyone pretty much knows that, but whatever. Here's the taking his dick pics out of context, bro.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. For an example, one day Gretchen Carlson passes him in the hall, and she's like, "Hey, Eric." Okay, so obviously she's gonna get a dick pic because she was clearly asking for it. The way that she came on to him like that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Right. Right.
Like, what choice did he have, really, or whatever? But the fake news doesn't give any context to the many, many dick pics that he sent out.
So
but
no one said, like, hey, Gretchen said hi to him. That might contextualize him sending her an unsolicited picture of his dick. Right.
Yeah. You're picking up what I'm putting down is what I'm trying to say, bro. And the one good thing to come out of this is my bro, Jesse Waters, basically running a monopoly over there. And, hey, I got to give him mad props because that dude knows what he's doing. And keep up the good work or whatever. But just try to remember you're fake news and everybody hates you.
I will try to remember that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Donald Trump Jr. Calling in on the first episode of The Majority Report. Of course, that is the relentlessly hilarious and very talented and also, frankly, crusading immigration lawyer, Stephen Robbins. I like you always have to balance Ronald Reagan with like, oh, and he also actually practices some of the most important human rights law in the country. What is it? I can never, and I'm subscribed to his podcast. but I believe it is
Redirect Podcast.
Redirect Podcast. You should be subscribing to that for sure. Okay, we have 3 other calls. I'm going to take these all really quick, and then I'll get to the phones and do that kind of rapid-fire intro. Then we'll throw somebody in the pyramid. Then we're done with the public show. We're going to go into overtime, into the post-game, where I do stories that you have picked from the Discord chat, which you only get to be on if you're a member. Patreon.com/TMBS. I think the last I checked, we were at 453 members. That allows everything to happen. I just cannot convey to you how much I appreciate it. And the bonus content that you're going to get is going to be very, very good. We're putting a lot of work into it. Yeah.
Well, maybe someday I was going to say I might teach people how to read 100 books a year. Might give away some advice in the bonus material. We should go through
that would be amazing. We definitely need. If you
cheat
got
codes.
life hacks, you will save money. You will be out ahead, especially of $8 a month for being a Brooksy. You're calling from a 480 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is Purush from Austin.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, doing good, man. Good show. This is the first. I'm actually calling the first time to your show.
Thank
to
you.
any show, like Minority Report or this one. So
thank
it's
you.
been pretty fun. I like all your impressions and stuff.
Thank you.
Shout out to Chris Lapato and also Dissident Present. I've been listening to their podcasts as well. And
yeah, shout out.
Actually, a lot of podcasts. I got to know a lot of podcasts from them and stuff. The other day, I'm on a visa here, on education visa from India, and my friend who's also from India, and we were talking about generally just about how tough it is for millennials, or rather, people in their late 20s and early 30s or whatever, to make a lot of money to actually, buy a house or get a new car or something like that, and how it is easy for people who are, basically baby boomers and stuff.
Right.
And yeah, and I don't know if you're going to touch upon stuff like that.
Definitely.
So maybe it'd be cool to
absolutely
get someone
I absolutely will. Although I do think, again, one of the things that I want to situate with this show that's really important to me is I think that we can look at things demographically, and demographics are an important tool, but what we don't have in this country at all is just class analysis. So we're at a phase of economic design and capitalism where those types of inequalities are inevitable, and millennials are the product of no cushioning and the kind of strip of the last vestiges of safety net, and really the whole sort of Keynesian arrangement of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. So, I think it's very important that we always remember that lower incomes, lower purchasing power, more economic stress, and debt is a feature, not a bug. And it's definitely a conversation we will be having a lot on this show, and I am honored to take your first call to a podcast, man. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Much appreciated.
Have a good day, and have a good time with the show.
You too. Thanks, man. All right, 2 more quickies. Then we're going to go to the crew. You're calling from a 518 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
My name is Jordan. My area code is New York, but I'm in rural Georgia.
What's going on, Jordan? Thanks for calling.
No, it's just I live in Georgia, and I never get to talk to another liberal.
Oh, all right. Well, here I am.
Or progressive, whatever you.
Maoist.
I guess my question is Maoist.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how do we reach out to people, in the South that don't agree with us politically?
Well, how do you think? You live there, man.
Usually doesn't go well.
Well, what's your experience? Yeah.
My experience? Well, typically, when I was in high school, I was one of the few black kids in a country school in Georgia.
Okay.
And, they were kind of racist, just to put it. They weren't all bad people, but a little bit racist.
Yep.
And they identified liberals with, Satanism, so it wasn't really a good starting point.
Well, for me, Satanism's not about, sacrificing kids or anything. It's just sort of more about giving into my every hedonistic impulse. So I think if you told them that, they... I mean, I don't know. Are you still in rural Georgia now?
No, I'm closer to Atlanta right now, and I'm in graduate school, so I don't have to be here
Right.
too often. But
What are you studying?
philosophy.
Philosophy. I mean, man, you would know better than me. I mean, my instinct is, in my experience of doing, anytime I've had a conversation with somebody on different kind of points in the grid politically, depending on who they are, usually I would say that, and this is anecdotal, maybe it's confirmation bias, but the anti-corporate inequality message is definitely something that, unless somebody is completely bought in to like the Scientology of politics, of libertarianism, it resonates, because that's their lived experience, right? Like, everybody who is not a top end earner, and even actually some top end earners, so anybody who's not like a hyper plutocrat, understands debt, diminished job prospects, and the experience of inequality, and the experience of really what we could call corporate tyranny in their lives. So I think that, that is the bridge. But I also, and this is where maybe I think that case should be made. And I think that I want to win everywhere with a left radical agenda. And something that Matt brings up a lot that's also really important is, being aware that there's a lot of erased histories in America. So, there was left movements in the South, radical civil rights, but labor movements. I mean, a lot of things, many of whom were, literally physically crushed. So I think that there's a history and a context for it. But I also am, I guess in some ways, like, I'm also a little cynical and not sentimental in some ways. And I think that, if somebody is paid up into racism and bigotry, or like, all right, I mean, fuck them. I mean, that's my kind of blunt feel. Like, that is where it becomes an actual political conflict, and that can't be appeased in any way, shape, or form. So that's my kind of read on it.
And never expect to go into one of those interactions and have the person actually change their mind within it, because it's never going to happen.
Right.
I see.
Yes, I agree.
All right. No. All right. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate the call, man, and please do call again. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. This is the last one before we start going to the crew. You're calling from a 212 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Michael. This is Charles from New York. I'm glad to call in on your first show, and congratulations.
Thanks a million.
I know you need to get off the
we got a
phone
minute.
quick, so
yeah, go ahead.
I first heard this theory on a podcast about a month ago, and it seemed incredibly stupid. But the more I've thought about it, the more sense it makes, and I'm hoping it can either slap some sense into me or vindicate me.
If you want to have sense slapped into you, you have to give me an address, and it will be about a $300 monthly membership, and I will literally smack you in the face.
Well,
all right,
let me lay out the situation, and
okay,
then we can discuss the price.
Okay, cool.
So, what are your thoughts about China annexing North Korea?
China annexing North Korea. That seems like a potentially extremely dangerous thing to do. But I'm not going to pretend to you that I have let's get back to mind of what Hannah said. Like, I have I have studied the agreed framework and the sunshine policy, and I have some understanding of how North Korea works a bit internally, but I am not going to pretend to you that I have any idea of what the policy solution to that is. I mean, that's something that I want to have people on to talk about. So, but it does strike me, proposition-wise, that is not a soothing move in a very volatile situation and regime. So my instinct is that's a mind-blowingly fucking stupid thing to say, but it's a podcast, so, there's license.
Just want to have an open and free exchange of ideas.
I just should say, I want to take that opportunity, and thank you, Charles. Open and free exchanges of ideas are banned from the show.
We have a very controlled exchange.
Yes, and there will also be a rationalist jihad segment that we are going to be introducing relatively soon on the program. So those are banned. But thank you for the call, my friend. And hey, Matt, could you vamp for like a 30 seconds or so? I'm just going to give Waz a try and see if we can get him on the line.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
I mean, I'm very excited to have Waz. Do you want me to play some? So
I mean,
you
you could
hear the thing. I mean,
okay, you can. I was thinking you could talk, so we don't have to do another break. But either way,
well, I mean, I guess I was thinking. You were saying about the guy being in touch with his local history, and I think it's interesting because I feel like that arms me much better for North Dakota because of its sort of latent anti-monopoly thing. I don't really know how it applies in certain southern areas where the culture has been like you said, Satanism and evangelical religion. I'm a bit. I mean, I'd be curious if knowing your history, if it's so racialized too,
Right.
like North Dakotans share in history, but those North Dakotans are all white generally, right? So yeah,
it's a different dynamic there. Calling Waz. Yo, Big Waz.
What's going on, bro?
What's up? How you doing? This is great. Where are you at?
I'm at work, bro.
All right.
I just had a really intense situation, but I'm good. I got at least 5 to 10 minutes.
No, it's okay. I won't keep you long. I just want everybody to know who you are. We're doing like the Reservoir Dogs thing for the new show. Waz, ESPN True Hoop, 2 Dope Boys in a Podcast. You come through on Majority all the time. You're one of my best friends and collaborators. Thank you for being part of this, man.
Absolutely. I got the word from you that you wanted to try a new venture, sort of, curate your own show, so to speak, with more your own sensibility.
Yes.
And I was like, obviously, I'm on board with that.
Tell Waz, could you, in 2 minutes, and then I'll let you go because I know it's crazy, but could you tell tell everybody how we met, how we became friends? Tell the Michael Waz origin story.
Okay, so I was already a big fan of the Majority Report and with host Sam Cedar and producer Matt and Kelly. I just always faithfully listened to the show. And then one day Mike did an Obama, it was like an Obama 5%er Nation of Islam, like hybrid impression. And I just thought that was genius. Because it's like, if you know anything about 5%er Nation of Islam culture, and if you're familiar with like Barack Obama's own like super duper measured personality, it's like a crazy thing to juxtapose against one another. So I just thought that was genius. So I contacted Mike on Twitter, and I said, dude, that is one of the funniest things I've ever heard anywhere. And I know for a fact that probably 2% of your audience, if that, even got the rest.
It was like 5% material for 2% of the audience. Yeah, exactly.
Which to me just kind of speaks to what your talents are, man. You know what I mean? To even first of all, to even understand what 5% of culture is, and to marry that with Barack, like the absurdity of those two things. I don't think most people could even fathom, what makes that so smart. So
the arc of history is long, but it bends toward Sharia.
That's right.
Yeah. And if we build a foundation on the community or ulama, then I think that we can have the sort of change that we're looking for, which is throwing white people out of their homes. But you can't do this without burning down the Korean man's laundromat. All right. So can't be on the sidelines grumbling. We got things to do. Allahu Akbar. So, no, but seriously, Waz, you and I, we've become really good friends, man. We spent time together, and it's politics, culture, sports. I mean, Waz is one of just hands down moving across the board from sport to culture to politics, one of the most insightful, broad perspective, entertaining, sharp, insightful, empathetic, brilliant dudes out there, and it's an honor to collaborate with you. And I know that you'll be coming through soon. We'll have many more conversations. So I just wanted to touch base with you on the first episode, man.
Yo, man, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I wish I was under a little bit better circumstances so I could be a little bit smarter and funnier, but I appreciate those kind
No,
words.
it's great, man.
And obviously, best of luck to you. I know this shit's going to be a smash. So
Thank you, man.
Thanks for having me, of course.
Thank you. I'll see you soon. Be well, man.
All right, later, brother.
Later.
If people want to check out more from Waz, he's on the ESPN True Hoop podcast, which is one of my favorite NBA podcasts. Actually, it's the only one I stay current with.
Yeah.
Another one that I do like that you can get a better sense of him, though, is he was on the Dunked On podcast around the end of 2016 in December. And it was a really good podcast because Waz knows a bunch about labor issues and it was all about collective bargaining and from a sports standpoint. And I'm very excited to have a guy like him come because I like to talk about sports and looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. No, Waz hits on a range, and that's that is obviously what I want to do on this show. Is I want to have conversations that are gonna, be current but have more kind of evergreen, last a little bit longer, and kind of touch on issues together like that. So and I apologize, this is a little awkward, I realize, but we're going to call Corey now.
It's old-fashioned.
It is old-fashioned. I kind of like it, actually. But, Skype has not changed their sounds for anything in years.
Oh.
Corey Pine, welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, man. I just had to close the window where you were talking. I was a little off my game.
Yeah, no worries. How do you think it's going?
It's off to a good start.
Yeah.
I got to say.
It's feeling pretty good. So, Corey, I just want, basically, give a brief intro to who I know some people, because obviously I've definitely, I've been on your pod, which everybody should also subscribe to. You've been on the Majority Report. I'm sure a lot of people have read your writing, but just talk a little bit about, who you are and also, the book and just give people a hint because, you're somebody else that's going to be a regular here, the kind of conversations that we'll be having.
Absolutely, man. First I got to say, I'm excited to be a regular.
Me too.
I found you through the Majority Report. So I'm really excited to see you launching this. You've been on my podcast, News from Nowhere, a few times. That's hosted by the Baffler magazine, where I write a lot. I'm basically a bitter career investigative reporter, and I'm working on my first book. It's called Live, Work, 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 Die: A Journey to the Savage Heart of Silicon Valley, and it'll be out next year from Metropolitan Books.
It's a perfect title. It's an absolutely perfect title.
Yeah, it's been a few years and several working titles in the making. I'm really excited about that. I write often for the Baffler. I have spent most of my career working all at weeklies. The podcast has been a lot of fun, and I think it's amazing what you and the crew are able to do on Majority Report. So I'm excited you're expanding this.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. And also, I should say that Corey is someone who, every time you hear the Peter Thiel impression, sometimes there's material that I got from Corey.
That's awesome.
And what's really disturbing is that I'll say something like, sometimes we'll be, having like a bull session. I'll be like, yeah, and then there are these people in Silicon Valley, and I do like the kind of they're trying to get like venture capital together to create like a car service that will run over homeless kids in Ecuador to get blood to them to fuel a singularity orgy in the hills of San Francisco. And I'm saying this with my sort of melodramatic flourish, and then Corey would be like, "Oh yeah, I was actually reporting on something like that. They were trying to put something like that together."
Totally.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
everything you just said is actually
so that's
that's what Peter Thiel's working on in his castle in New Zealand.
I actually am not sure I want children from Ecuador anymore. I like the blood ratio of the Nicaragua better. So, yes, Corey is a brilliant reporter and helps inspire that material.
As long as I'm on the line, I was listening. I was listening to the first calls and stuff, and it was good to see Hannah on too. Another from newer guest. I thought something your caller said was really making me think. Like, The one guy that said, he and his buddies were talking about how easy it is for the baby boomers compared to people roughly our age, like 30s, whatever.
Yep.
I thought you handled that call really well because, our job on shows like this is to educate people about why, generational politics are an insufficient answer compared to, say, class politics. The generational stuff is very visceral. Like, we're really talking about our parents, like when when we talk about it, everybody's thinking about their parents, like, oh yeah, I wish they'd get off my case, But the class, the class analysis is much more apt and much deeper, but it requires like a level of understanding, like layers of language, and abstraction that just isn't there with the generational politics. So it's part of our job to sort of bring that to people. And then your other caller, he was talking about how it doesn't go well when he tries to reach out to people down south and try to like basically flip them to join, I don't know, DSA or something.
Right.
And that wraps it up in a bow too, because you asked at the opening of the show is like, can we de-dumbify, Right. And maybe there's a limit to where we can de-dumbify. The human brain is only so big, but really it's a multi-generational process. It's not going to happen overnight. You came on my show and we talked about persuasion versus power, and I feel like this is something that people misunderstand about persuasion. It starts like at the earliest ages, like when people get socialized and then they get educated, and then they get influence from their peers and television. There's building blocks, right? When it comes to changing how people think, it's a lifetime's work. So, it's good to have comrades on that, because there's no like you're not going to convince, who's that guy that keeps calling the majority report? It's like a libertarian dude, and
Greg.
like you're never,
Greg.
like you can.
Greg's banned from this show, by the way. No, he's preemptively banned.
Sorry, Greg.
It's just too tight. I'm sorry. And also, I don't believe in a free exchange of ideas. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
look, if Greg wants to call, he can call, but I will only talk to him in the Peter Thiel character.
Well, it's a lot easier to persuade. It's a lot harder to persuade someone like Greg, like you might never do it, than to engage in demographically driven, electoral politics, which is what the Democratic Party does.
Right.
And that's why they double down on, really brute, cynical identity politics. And that's really, what your callers are getting at is this basic question. Why does the Democratic Party operate the way it does? Because it's hard to persuade people, and it's easy to get them to rally around crude stuff like race and gender and generational politics than it is to sort of educate them about the deeper underlying dynamics that made this world.
Right.
And also, you have to understand those if you want to change it. So,
right, and also you can't, and I know you make this point all the time yourself, that you can't deal with the fact that this is a structurally white supremacist, misogynist nation without the inequality and the class. And so that the fact that actually, and then when you go and even look at the sort of like the radical lineage in the United States, whether it's, Malcolm X or Michael Harrington, it always ends at some type of socialist, formulation. And that is why, if I can, really, be robust to this, that's why someone like Fred Hampton gets murdered, is because he's a direct challenge to the policing structure in Chicago. And then he's also, even as an incredibly young guy, is articulating this synergy of radical cross-boundary politics that's also anchored not in artificially erasing differences either. And when that politics rears its head, that seriously threatens capital. And in our, small ways and with Mike Cernovich impressions, that's what we're trying to do.
And memes in our off time.
Yes. So, Corey, thanks a million. I can't wait to have you on regularly. I think actually you might be on with me for the segment next week.
Looks like. All right. Good luck, guys.
All right,
Thanks.
brother. Be well. Bye. All right, 2 more quick calls, then the pyramid, and then, guys, we're going into the post game where I'm going to take stories from you and do a couple more calls and IMs. Obviously, look, I think we have a good structure here, but we're going to work out the kinks and we're going to keep refining. But good out of the gate. I'm going to call a Noah now, and I hope that the Skype thing does not annoy people. Matt, give the people more insight.
More insight. Jeez, you gotta prepare me for this stuff.
Don't give insight. Just talk nonsense.
Well,
it doesn't matter.
I did actually have something to say. I think, first of all, Corey is very, very smart guy. People should follow him. Is it Corey_Pine or Corey Pine?
It is Corey_Pine.
But people should look him up because like you said, you use a lot of Silicon Valley material from him. Often when I retweet a lot, and I had to ask my followers if I retweet too much, and the poll came back overwhelmingly, no, I don't. One of the two people I think that I benefit from retweeting is Corey Pine because he's always retweeting a lot of good stuff.
All right. I'm having trouble getting to a Noah. I'm going to give this one more try. Let me see. 1 second.
Also, Matt Brunig has if I remember right, has a segment on I think it's for Deimos. I would have looked it up, but it's basically don't blame the boomers because it's a too easy narrative to get into. It is very, like my parents. Neither of my parents graduated college,
right.
but they grew up in North Dakota. That was sort of post-war North Dakota. There's a lot of rural telephone communications stuff that's going on. That's actually what my grandparents' family business was basically installing phones and across the country, and that's sort of that a lot of it obviously federally subsidized,
right?
And we also homesteaded. Like that's both of my parents descended from people who homesteaded. And as far as like white privilege and what this country has allowed the sort of white American dream to be, basically that's I've completely benefited from that. So to complain too much about.
I'm calling. Is the sound?
Oh, sorry.
No problem. Gene, are you there? Gene?
Anyway, class, not generation.
Thank you. Class, not generation is the core point. Yeah, Gene, I just tried you. I'll try you again. Yeah. Sorry that this isn't more elegant, guys. Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always these very alluring sort of pockets of analysis that are important and are fun from a sociological perspective, especially the generational stuff. Because I think, like, obviously things like race and gender work more structurally innately. But generationally, like, yeah, we have different pop preferences, we have different cultural inclinations. But how you're working out the economy from a generational perspective is an economic question, fundamentally. It's not there's nothing particular about, taste and attributes. So conversely, even though I want to make it a class conversation, you see all these stupid articles about, Gene.
Hello?
All right. Hey. So this is Gene Bajlan, who is a academic, co-writer of mine, and also on the crew. We're running tight, man, but I just let everybody know who you are and the type of stuff that you'll be working with me on the show. You not only will be doing segments with me, but you're also working with me. As an example, we're doing a history primer on Erdogan's Twitter army and sort of modern authoritarianism coming out of Turkey. This is the type of stuff that subscribers only get.
Yeah, well, basically, my name is Gene Bashlan. I'm from the UK, and I basically research and teach Middle Eastern history in Missouri State University. And my sort of the things I work on are mainly Kurdish nationalism and broader political developments in the Middle East and things like that. And working with Michael is great, as working with someone who basically has some experience in the region and really getting behind. I'm really interested in working on those issues, which basically are often superficially looked at in the American media, or even by some academic sources or people who purport to be experts on the region, these security experts, and really try and look into some of the issues pertaining to security, authoritarianism, nationalism, sectarianism, and religious struggles in the Middle East. So, these are some exciting things that I hope that Michael and myself are going to be able to work on together and bring to listeners of the show.
Yeah, man. And we just as a flavor, we have a piece recently in Open Democracy on why the kind of Turkish civil society movement working to rein in Erdogan needs to deal with the legacy in Turkey of suppressing Kurdish rights, that without kind of embracing the Kurdish human rights cause, that kind of effort is doomed. We had a piece in Jacobin drawing parallels between the Republican Party and the right-wing religious authoritarian-leaning party that's running Turkey. So you'll find a lot of stuff like that from us. Also, Gene does a great Andrew Dice Clay impression.
Oh, thank you. I'm really on the spot, so I obviously can't do it straight off the bat, but I do try my best.
Could you just say hickory dickory dock in your accent?
Hickory dickory dock. The cat ran up the clock. It's really excellent, having a British accent in the Midwest, because people automatically think you're a university professor. So,
But you literally, you actually are.
Yeah, I am. I'm conforming to the stereotype. But there's actually quite a few British people coming out here to seek their fortune in the steppes. I often think of myself as a kind of reverse Lawrence of Arabia, coming out west rather than east to engage with a people who, culturally and religiously are whirled away from things that I've observed in other.
Well, Gene,
other
I gotta keep running, but I'm excited. There's going to be a lot. People are going to be hearing a lot from you on the show and in the history segments. Thanks a million, man.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it, Michael. Great. Good luck with the show, and I'm looking forward to taking part. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, brother. All right,
take care.
Take care. Okay, guys. Let me read a couple of IMs, and then I will call Anoa. Throw someone in the pyramid. Then we go to the post game. Billy Buckner, congrats, bro. Good luck. Will there be a trademark bullshit in the next show? Didn't catch any of this show. I don't understand. Will there be any trade? Is that what he's saying?
Is he pitching a feature? Maybe
that could be good. Trademark bullshit feature. I like it.
Maybe corporate malfeasance or something.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Thames Darwin, Jamal, Mazel Tov on the show. Question: what's the jacket and collared shirt? Does Jank Uger know you his wardrobe?
Somebody made the same joke about.
Oh my god!
Somebody made.
I was thinking much more like Miami Vice than Jank Uger. Excuse me.
Somebody made the same joke about Dave Rubin.
Ooh, whoever made that joke is banned. How dare you, Epish? Why do so many in the USA think that IQ is not pseudoscience, that it actually measures intelligence? Is this just because it's pushed so much in the media? I talk to people in Europe who are shocked that Americans don't know it's pseudoscience. I would suggest that people try to persuade only people in their broader community that are the place of work. Not only is IQ pseudoscience, and I'm going to do a conversation on this soon, the initial purpose of IQ was to measure places of academic intervention to improve performance. It was not developed as a fixed feature of intelligence until it was embraced by the eugenics movement, of which obviously people like Charles Murray are the successors to. Off and Bang. There was an article, Off and Ben. There was an article in the Telegraph recently that said the conditions that led to the 2008 financial meltdown are still around today. Of course, since it's a premium article, I can't read it. So F the Telegraph. Regardless, people like Richard Wolff and Steve Keen are talking about the very poor recovery and how the conditions for another crash are still around. Given the large amount of economic crises that we are having, as well as the vast inequality we have in the world, continuing exploitation of third world labor and so on, do you believe that a Marxist perspective is relevant? I think a Marxist perspective is essential. I mean, at the very least, analytically and descriptively of how the world works. And I do think that it's a major, the left broadly, by buying into this sort of like comic book version of American history that have given up the analytic tools of Marxism, have basically we're dropping some of our heaviest ammunition, which incidentally also historically, yes, did Marxism play a role in a lot of historical tragedies in authoritarian states, whether it's the Soviet Union or or China? Yes, but Marxist theoreticians are also the reason there are things like the German Social Democratic Party. Okay, like that's also the sort of political successors to it, and really any form of sustained critique how the world works and why things that are meant to appear natural aren't natural. So it's deeply relevant, and that's part of what will be done on this show.
Think of it as not a dogma, but a canon of historical and political literature, basically, like Gramsci and C.L.R. James and Hobsbawm. Like you should read them and be familiar with a lot of those people.
And you should read Capital for sure. Okay, I am going to call Anoa. Then we get to the pyramid. Then we take about 5-10 minute break, and we're still streaming on the app, and then we're going to get to member curated stories. I know David is in the Discord chat right now. It's a feature that only members get. I drop in there sometimes and do Q&As, and there's going to be follow-up Q&As after the history and idea primer segments are released. That will happen on Sundays and Mondays as well. I'm going to call Anoa right now. Bear with me, folks. Anoa Changa, everyone. Really, really excited to touch base with her. Bhaskar and Alona will be joining in coming weeks as well. Sorry?
You want to introduce her while you're dialing?
Yeah. So Anoa Changa is a attorney. She's a human rights activist. She hosts the Way with Anoa podcast. You can see her on all sorts of independent media outlets, podcasts.
Hello.
Anoa.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. It's so good to hear your voice. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on, Michael.
You needed to be part of this. That was non-negotiable.
I appreciate it. It's been a crazy past few months. I really appreciate your love and support always. Thank you so much. So it is my honor to be squad.
I need the insight. I was just telling everybody about the Way with Anoa. I was explaining that you're a political analyst, you're an attorney, you're an activist. Would you just give like a little thumbnail of you, who you are, the types of things as you come on with me in this more kind of regular basis that we're going to be talking about? Give people the Anoa Changa experience.
The Anoa Changa experience. I mean,
yes.
we're going to be talking about mad stuff. I mean,
yes.
I mean, you and I, we run the gamut, whether we dibble and dabble a little bit, something that's like, more social commentary, pop culture-ish, or we talk like real deep politics. Like right now, apparently there's an article out today about black progressives are the reason why black people are not progressive. We'll be really kicking it on some real stuff, digging into nuance and actually addressing a perspective that is not found anywhere else in mainstream corporatized media at all. You might find it in a couple of the podcast stuff out there, maybe not, but you'll definitely, the conversations we have, tend to be really deep, nuanced. I mean, like from the conversations we've had, like off the record, on the record, really dibbling, dabbling into how we really need to look beyond these mere squabbles of identity or ego and really digging deep into issues that are affecting our communities across the board. So that is just a general snippet of like the type of stuff that, you and I, chop it up about, that I talk about. I mean, whether it's lifting up progressive candidates or issues or communities or organizers and issues, shout out to workers trying to organize down at Nissan in Mississippi.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so much going on right now that is really being overshadowed by these false narratives, and bad actors who use their massive platforms to leverage misinformation across the board.
So I think what we're going to do a lot, in addition to have a really fun time, because I also do inappropriate things. Like one time Anoa was saying, hey, I'm on Twitter, I'm a little tipsy, asked me a question, and I had to hit her with it. I don't even remember, but it was really mean. A really mean F, marry, kill. Oh, that was brutal. I apologize, but not really. Although I found out that you got a soft spot for Tony Blair.
Tony Blair?
He was the one who could get it. He was the one who could get it. And no, I remember.
Oh, wait, I did say that.
Yeah.
I did say that. Yes. Well, I forget what my choices were.
Oh, they were really bad. He was the obvious one.
My choices were awful. But,
they were totally unfair.
Corbin, I like a little great, Silver Fox action, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, but Corbin would never be in that list. Corbin would be like the obvious one.
Be on that list.
Yeah.
He'd be on a different list, but he could get it too. So I'm just saying.
That's awesome.
Is Netroots is happening here in Atlanta, and I'm at a bunch of folks have a informal people of color progressive caucus happening, and I just had to step away to be able to talk to you, Michael,
Well,
because
thank you.
I think the people you're bringing together and what you're adding to the mix is so crucial and necessary to the discourse that we're having right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
can't wait
it's
to
a real
have it.
watershed moment in our it's not just in politics, in the nation and history as a whole. And having the collection of voices that you're bringing together is I'm just really happy to be a part of the whole crew. So
I'm honored you're joining me, and we're going to course correct mainstream bullshit and then shed light on things that nobody are talking about. And that's exactly what we're going to do, and I cannot wait. This gives me an excuse to finally talk with you regularly. So, Anoa, thanks a million. Get back to your thing, and I'll be talking with you really soon. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you. Just real quick. Just
yeah.
Plug. I'm doing a panel at Netroots on Thursday, 2:30 p.m. We are live streaming. It's live streaming to the way else know at Netroots Station is also live streaming on their Facebook page. I'm being joined by Michelle Watley, Mary Hooks of Song, Cesar Vargas, as well as Congresswoman Barbara Lee. We're talking about progressive while black. We're talking about being black and progressive in America right now. Spelling all the myths, putting it down, just kicking it straight with no shooter. So
we'll have a link.
So thank you.
But what's your Twitter again? Just say that real quick before you jump off.
My Twitter is The Way with Anoa, The Way with ANOA.
Okay.
That's the same on Instagram, Facebook. Hit me up, you guys. Check me out, definitely. Appreciate you, Michael.
Appreciate you. Talk with you real soon, Anoa. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, bye.
All right, bye. Okay, everybody. We have to get to a new segment that we're going to do, and I'm going to read the rest of the IMs in the post game. But there are people, and I have said this at various times on broadcast, where I've said Robbie Mook, as an example, needs to be locked in a pyramid. Alan Dershowitz is supposed to have been locked in a pyramid for at least 30 years. I don't know what he's doing still walking around.
Alan Dershowitz would tell you, regardless of how good the justification is, that really no one should ever be locked in a pyramid because it's a violation of civil liberties. But we disagree.
Yes, I disagree entirely with Alan Dershowitz. I also wonder if he would really be advocating that if it involved a treatment of a Palestinian. But that is why we have a new segment. And Matt, I would like my music, please, where we lock somebody in a pyramid. Now, you can always tweet at me, message me on Discord with nominations, but this week we wanted to throw, actually not the guy who wrote the Google memo. You can turn it down a little bit. I do love it, but it's a lot. So, Google this past week fired an engineer by the name of James Damore, who wrote a plodding, boring, exhausting, and sexist memo where he basically said Google should not worry about diversifying and hiring more women because women's brains are different. They want to stay home with kids and not have great, high-paying scientific jobs, and it's just science. Never heard pseudoscience to justify bigotry before. He was fired. To be honest with you, I don't know if I support firing a guy for an internal memo, but it was certainly an incredibly stupid, offensive, and wrong-headed thing to say. Google disavowed it, and then they fired the guy. And then, and this is our candidate for the pyramid this week, a Eric Weinstein, who is an associate of Peter Thiel. He works under Peter Thiel at Thiel Capital. Tweeted, "Dear Google, stop teaching my girl that her path to financial freedom lies in not in coding, but in complaining to HR. Thanks in advance, a dad." Well, Eric, I think the fact that Google still has massive pay disparities across all of their departments, the fact that it's a company that can track literally every piece of information known to humankind on Earth, and they refused because it would be too effortful to track wage disparities in their own internal practices, and women are still woefully underrepresented at every part of the company. The purpose of HR is to allow talented people like your future daughter to have access to those jobs after they've studied coding. I don't think anybody said that somebody with no background should just walk into Google and get a job because they're a woman, but that's clearly what you think of all women coders, including, unfortunately, maybe your daughter. So Eric Weinstein is thrown in the pyramid, taking the key away. He's gone for this week. That is the first edition of In the Pyramid, unless Matt has something else to add before we throw him away.
Pull it up on the screen, but the pinned tweet for Eric Weinstein is his appearance on the Rubin Report.
Ugh.
So I think that, and I had another follower of mine say that he's also appeared on the Sam Harris Show.
Of course.
Now, those two bits of information tell me that that the managing director for Teal Capital, Eric Weinstein, probably funds a lot of right-wing media, and they do a little bit of favors by getting him some airtime. I'd be interested to know how much money Eric, I think in the interest of full disclosure, he should tell people, what sort of shows he funds.
I would be very interested to find. And
I'd be shocked if he's not giving money to Harris and Dave Rubin.
I would be shocked as well. And I would also say, as a general rule of thumb, follow the money, not the pseudoscience, and you'll be smarter and a better person. Everybody, we are going to go into the post game, which will be released for members tomorrow. I want to thank everybody who has become a member of the show. Patreon.com/TMBS. It's what allows all of this to happen. It allows, the show to be available. It allows me to, make a living and do it and really bring these conversations forward that I care really deeply about, these perspectives, and also obviously the comedy. I want to thank everybody who has made this possible. The public version of the show is going to live on YouTube. You're always going to be able to find it. There are going to be clip segments of this. Look for the Michael Brooks Show on iTunes. As soon as it is publicly as approved and on iTunes, we want everybody, including people that are members on Patreon, to download it and write reviews so that this can spike up the charts and we can start taking all of these fucking morons on. I'm sorry, I was just thinking of Sam Harris and Dave Rubin. I appreciate it immensely. We'll be back same time, same place, 7 p.m. Tuesday for the YouTube live stream. Thanks a million. Matt, thank you. Would not be happening without you. For everybody else, stay tuned if you're listening on the app. And then members, I know you're in Discord. We're going to have a little team meeting, pick out your stories, get back on the phones, keep the IMs going, and we'll be back going in about another 5 minutes. Thanks, everybody.